My parents gave Jack access to credit cards in my name, then blamed me when they maxed them out on his bail and drugs. When I confronted them about the identity theft, my mother slapped me and screamed, "You abandoned this family. You don't get to judge us from your comfortable little college life." I stayed silent. That was 2 years ago. Last week, she posted a TikTok crying about her angel son Jack and forgot to mention Oscar's funeral. I looked up to my older brother Jack for all my life, and I thought my younger brother Oscar looked up to me. Even though I loved Jack and wanted nothing more to be like him, for some reason he avoided playing with me. Our mom suffered from hyperthyroidism, which made her extremely unstable. She had good and bad days. She'd take me to the water park and go down tubes with me. Other days she'd keep a belt in the car to hit me while she picked me up from school because I got a 99 on a test. I thought that Jack would understand where I was coming from, but he wanted nothing to do with me, so I gave up forming a relationship with him up until my 7th birthday. On my 7th birthday, my dad bought me a bike. I rarely got to see him because he was working all the time, so him teaching me meant everything. My eyes were filled with a spark that only exists during childhood. So the next day, I asked Jack if he wanted to have a shot at it. When I saw his face light up, I thought I had finally said the right thing, but then he took it and ran it straight into a wall. Jack was fine, but my bike was completely destroyed. Jack came over to me crying, but instead of comforting me, or even just patting my back, he hit me and told me to shut the F up so mom and dad don't hear. I stopped trying to have a relationship with him after that, mainly because it was too painful. And a year later, Oscar was born. I decided early on that I wanted him to have a better childhood than me. So when he was old enough to understand words, I always made sure to give him the praise our parents never did. At 4 years old, he'd burst into my room wearing Jack's clothes and start randomly performing a fashion show. I'd clap every time and tell him how swag he looked. He had no idea I was lying through my teeth, lol. Because you know the awkward phase? The one where you just looked clapped 24/7? Well, Oscar's lasted until he was literally 16. It's honestly a miracle he wasn't bullied. But I don't even think he noticed how much of a loser the world saw him because of how well I treated him. Go me. But that's when Oscar and Jack stopped sharing a room together, and Oscar instead shared with me. Because Jack had gone from being a slightly disobedient, horrible brother to a full-on abusive addict. One night he came home and instantly the entire apartment reeked of the devil's lettuce. With a megaphone, he started yapping at the top of his lungs. "Hey guys, how are you doing today?" Just garbage. You see, his strategy was simple. It was to keep my parents awake until they couldn't bear the sleep deprivation anymore, and hand over cash so he could buy more drugs. It was honestly awful. I always tried to shield Oscar from it, whether it was by putting earplugs into his ears or driving him to my friend's house. But either way, it was extremely distressing. And one time, when I came home to my mom putting concealer over a black eye Jack had given her, I decided enough was enough. I waited until my dad came home and cornered him in the dark hallway. I told him he needed to kick Jack out and get a restraining order, that he was scary and dangerous. And my dad was kind, probably the kindest one in the family, but he was also passive, the type to get robbed on the street and apologize for not having more money to give. So he just nodded. But months passed, and of course nothing changed. Then came the news that made me depressed for months. I had the opportunity to transfer to my dream college, one that was halfway across the country. I remember waiting until Oscar was asleep to cry my eyes out into my teddy bear, because going meant leaving Oscar behind, leaving him to deal with our family's BS by himself. But then I had a new thought. If I graduated and got a better job than I otherwise would have, then I could afford to provide a better life for myself and Oscar, a home away from home, so to speak. That morning when I broke the news, I expected his eyes to flood with a deep disappointment to beg me to stay, but instead his face remained completely stoic. "I'm really happy for you, Hannah." His tone was monotonous, same as always. I left home a few months later, and it honestly felt like I was abandoning my child or something. Me and Oscar kept in contact, and a few months later he told me Jack was in rehab, that everything was finally okay, and he was grateful for everything I'd given him over the years. Plus he was in college too, so we were both able to get away from the noise. So when my friend said her sister was visiting LA, I told her she could stay in my family's apartment, because while my parents had their flaws, being unwelcoming to strangers was not one of them. She thanked me profusely, and that was that, or so I thought. She ended up staying in me and Oscar's room, and one night Jack came home after relapsing, filled to the brim with alcohol and drugs. Suddenly, the bedroom door flung open and he stole the innocence of my friend's sister. My phone rang at 3 a.m., jolting me awake in my dorm room. Oscar's name flashed on the screen, and my stomach immediately dropped. He never called this late. I fumbled to answer, already throwing off my covers. Oscar's voice came through shaky and different, older somehow than I remembered. He explained what happened, how Jack had hurt Maya, my friend Sarah's sister who was staying in our old room. The words tumbled out of him in fragments. Screams in the night, Jack fleeing the scene, substance paraphernalia scattered everywhere. I booked the first red-eye flight home while Sarah screamed at me through her own tears. She kept asking how I could have sent her sister into that house, how I could have trusted my family. I had no answers, just the sick feeling spreading through my chest as I threw clothes into a bag. The hospital waiting room felt like a different universe when I arrived 6 hours later. My mother sat rigid in a plastic chair, insisting to anyone who would listen that Maya must have misunderstood the situation. My father stared at the floor, hands clasped between his knees, saying nothing. The familiar dynamic made me want to scream. Oscar pulled me aside near the vending machines. His face looked years older than when I'd left for college. He reached into his backpack and pulled out his phone, showing me video files dated back months, hidden camera footage from the hallway outside our old room, documentation of Jack's escalating behavior that Oscar had been collecting, preparing for something like this. Maya initially refused the RP kit. The nurse spoke gently to her about the importance for prosecution, but Maya just turned her face to the wall. Sarah held her sister's hand while I stood frozen in the doorway, watching my friend's family shatter because of mine. The police arrived with notebooks and skeptical expressions until Oscar showed them his documentation. Their entire demeanor shifted. Suddenly they were interested, taking notes, asking for copies of everything. One detective pulled Oscar aside for a longer conversation while I watched my parents huddle together in denial. Jack's message appeared in our family group chat while the police were still there, playing victim, asking how we could believe some stranger over our own blood. My mother's face lit up with hope at his words while my father continued his silent statue impression. That night, Oscar and I sat in his car outside the hospital. He revealed the truth. Jack had never gone to rehab. Our parents had lied to keep me at college, to maintain their fiction that everything was fine. The betrayal cut deeper than any of Jack's violence ever had. Sarah arrived at the the hospital the next morning like a hurricane. She confronted my parents in the hallway, her voice echoing off the walls as she told them their failure to act had enabled a monster. My mother tried to defend herself, but Sarah wasn't having it. Other families stared as security eventually intervened. The hospital's security footage from that night had mysteriously corrupted. The IT department claimed a system glitch, but the timing was too convenient. Without that evidence, everything would rest on Maya's testimony and Oscar's documentation. Oscar finally explained why he'd been documenting everything. He knew I'd blame myself for leaving, for not being there to protect him and whoever else Jack might hurt. He needed proof that this wasn't my fault, that Jack's escalation was inevitable regardless of my presence. Jack returned home at dawn the next day, demanding money for a lawyer. When our parents hesitated, he grabbed Oscar by the shirt, shaking him. My mother quickly offered her jewelry to pawn while my father pretended to be asleep on the couch. Oscar recorded the entire exchange on his phone from his pocket. I confronted our parents about their enabling after Jack left with the jewelry. The words I'd held back for years poured out, about the violence, the fear, the way they'd sacrificed their other children to avoid dealing with Jack. My mother's hand connected with my face before I even saw it coming. She screamed that I had abandoned the family, that I had no right to judge from my comfortable college life. Maya finally agreed to press charges after hours of gentle encouragement from Hannah and Sarah. The detectives took her formal statement with careful professionalism. She spoke in a monotone, detached voice about that night while Sarah squeezed her hand. Jack's dealer Rico contacted me through Facebook. The message was simple. Jack owed $15,000 and the family would pay one way or another. He included details about Oscar's class schedule, making the threat clear. Oscar broke down that night and admitted he'd been paying Jack's smaller debts from his college fund, trying to protect the family from exactly this situation. His savings were nearly gone, sacrificed to keep dealers from our door. The landlord served our parents an eviction notice. Multiple complaints about Jack's behavior had piled up, and the assault was the final straw. Jack's cruelty breaks my heart, but Oscar secretly recording everything shows such incredible strength. The way he protected evidence while pretending to be fine all those months. What a brave younger brother fighting back in his own quiet way. My mother blamed me for bringing a stranger into their home, as if Maya's presence had somehow caused Jack's actions. I searched Jack's room while our parents were at the lawyer's office. Hidden in his closet, I found stolen items from neighbors, substance paraphernalia, and worst of all, photos of unconscious women. My hands shook as I documented everything with my phone. Detective Chen pulled me aside at the station. She revealed that Jack had been reported for assault 3 times before, but no charges had stuck. The pattern was clear. He knew how to pick victims, how to avoid consequences. Until now. Our parents drained Hannah's college savings to hire Jack an expensive lawyer without asking permission. I found out when my tuition payment bounced. The financial aid office called, confused about the sudden change in my account status. Jack posted bail and immediately violated the restraining order by showing up at Maya's hotel. He stood in the parking lot, shouting her name until other guests called the police. Maya locked herself in the bathroom, reliving her trauma while Sarah tried to calm her. Oscar intervened when he saw Jack at the hotel. Jack's fists connected with Oscar's ribs and face repeatedly before I arrived. I found Oscar being loaded into an ambulance, his face swollen beyond recognition. Jack was arrested again, but our parents were already talking about posting his bail a second time. The hospital bills started arriving while Oscar recovered from his injuries. Each envelope brought a new wave of panic as I calculated the mounting costs against my already drained savings. My parents expected me to cover everything since Oscar had been defending my friend. I discovered the real extent of their betrayal when my credit card got declined at the pharmacy. Multiple cards, all maxed out. My hands trembled as I called each company, learning my parents had opened accounts in my name and given Jack access for his emergencies. Sarah's family hired a lawyer to explore their options. The attorney contacted me directly, explaining they were considering a civil suit against my entire family. Our friendship hung by the thinnest thread as Sarah struggled between supporting her traumatized sister and maintaining our relationship. The lawyer requested depositions, and I watched helplessly as my childhood trauma became ammunition in legal documents. Jack's expensive attorney crafted a narrative that made my skin crawl. He argued I had orchestrated a setup by inviting an attractive young woman into what I knew was an unstable home environment. The victim blaming made me physically ill, but the lawyer's reputation meant people listened. He painted Jack as a troubled young man failed by his family, particularly his vindictive sister who abandoned him. Oscar's discharge from the hospital brought new challenges. He flinched whenever anyone approached too quickly, jumped at sudden noises, and stopped attending his classes entirely. The confident young man I'd left behind had been replaced by someone who checked locks obsessively and slept with his back against the wall. I used my remaining funds to find him a therapist, knowing it meant I couldn't afford the lawyer I needed for the identity theft case. Maya's sewer slide attempt shattered everyone. Sarah called me from the hospital, her voice hollow as she described finding her sister unconscious in the hotel bathroom. The note Maya left behind spoke of being blamed, of not being believed, of feeling like she was drowning in a system that protected predators. I sat on my dorm room floor, reading her words through Sarah's texts, feeling the weight of my family's destruction spreading like poison. The choice between Oscar's therapy and my legal defense wasn't really a choice at all. I withdrew the funds meant for fighting the identity theft, sending them instead to the therapist who might help my brother sleep through the night again. The credit card companies won their case by default, leaving me responsible for thousands in debt I never created. Jack's friends started their harassment campaign online with military precision. They found my social media accounts, my college email, even the restaurant where I worked part-time. My new address appeared in comment sections with suggestions about what should happen to girls who betrayed family. The campus security increased patrols around my dorm, but I still moved my bed away from the window. My mother orchestrated an intervention that felt more like an ambush. She gathered aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends in my childhood home, each taking turns explaining how my actions had torn the family apart. They spoke of loyalty, of blood being thicker than water, of handling problems internally. I sat in the center of their circle, feeling like a witch at trial while my mother cried about her ungrateful daughter. Oscar made a recording during one of our mother's emotional breakdowns. She admitted knowing Jack was dangerous, had known for years, but insisted family came first. She spoke of covering his tracks, of paying off neighbors, of keeping authorities away. Oscar's hands shook as he showed me the video, explaining his plan to give it to prosecutors. We both knew it would mean completely severing our family ties. Rico's men left their calling card at my college apartment apartment while I was in class. The door hung off its hinges, my belongings scattered and destroyed. Payment due, family debt, was spray painted across my bedroom wall. Campus police took photos and filed reports, but everyone knew they couldn't protect me from substance dealers seeking $15,000. The college administration called me in for a meeting about my criminal associations. The background check they'd run showed my family's legal troubles, and they expressed concern about the safety of other students. They suggested I might be happier at a different institution, one that could better accommodate my complicated situation. The threat of suspension hung unspoken but clear. My father finally broke his silence during a secret meeting at a coffee shop near campus. He slid an envelope across the table containing $50,000 in cash, explaining it could all go away if I let the family handle Jack privately. His hands trembled as he spoke of tradition, of not airing dirty laundry, of protecting the family name. I stared at the money that could solve my immediate problems while knowing what it would cost Maya. The wire I wore to our next meeting recorded everything. My father's admissions poured out like a broken dam, covering Jack's crimes since he was 14, paying off victims, destroying evidence. He spoke of a cousin Jack had hurt at 15, a neighbor's daughter at 17, always with the same pattern of payment and silence. The FBI agent listening in the van outside had heard enough. Jack's arrest on multiple counts happened simultaneously with our parents being taken in for conspiracy and obstruction. I watched from across the street as officers led them out in handcuffs, my mother screaming about betrayal while my father maintained his stoic silence. The neighbors gathered to watch the family they'd known for decades revealed as criminals. Extended family members turned against Oscar and me with vicious unity. We became the family traitors in their narrative, the ungrateful children who chose strangers over blood. Cousins I'd grown up with posted about our betrayal online. Aunts who'd bounced me on their knees called to express their disgust. The family we'd known evaporated, leaving only Oscar and me clinging to each other. Rico's deadline approached with terrifying speed, 48 hours to produce $15,000 or face consequences. Oscar's scholarship had already been revoked due to the criminal investigation surrounding our family. We sat in my car, counting and recounting our combined resources, coming up short by thousands. The weight of our situation pressed down like a physical force. The DEA's involvement came after I discovered Jack had been dealing substances from our parents' apartment. The evidence was hidden in plain sight. Scales in the kitchen, bags in the freezer, customer lists in my old school notebooks. My parents had taken a percentage, turning their home into a criminal enterprise while their younger children lived there. Every government agency suddenly wanted to talk to us. All family assets were frozen as potential substance proceeds. Bank accounts, the apartment, even my mother's jewelry became evidence. Oscar and I found ourselves truly broke, cut off from any family resources that might have helped. My college fund, already drained by Jack's lawyer, was now completely inaccessible. We had nothing but each other and mounting debts. Our grandmother's visit brought the final betrayal. She sat in my dorm room, this woman I'd loved and trusted, and admitted she'd known everything. Every assault, every cover-up, every payment to silence victims. She'd counseled my parents to protect Jack, to keep the family secrets, to maintain appearances. Her justifications sounded hollow as she explained that family reputation mattered more than strangers' pain. The trial date arrived with Jack's lawyer successfully arguing for separate proceedings. He claimed trying the entire family together would prejudice the jury against his client. The judge agreed, scheduling Jack's trial first while my parents remained on house arrest with ankle monitors. The system's careful procedures felt like another form of injustice as Maya struggled with the delay. Oscar and I were evicted from our apartment when the landlord learned about the asset freeze. We loaded our remaining belongings into my car, which became our temporary home, sleeping in the back seat, showering at the campus gym, trying to maintain some dignity while our lives crumbled. The irony of being homeless while our parents sat in their apartment on house arrest wasn't lost on us. Rico's deadline hanging over their heads while they count pocket change in a car that doubles as their bedroom. This family drama went from soap opera to survival horror faster than Jack's bail money disappeared. Sarah's family proceeded with their civil suit, naming me as a defendant alongside my parents. Their lawyer argued I had negligently placed Maya in danger by recommending she stay with my family. My liability insurance wouldn't cover the claims due to the criminal nature of the acts. I faced potential damages in the millions with no resources to fight back. Oscar's sewer slide attempt happened in a gas station bathroom. I found him unconscious, pills scattered on the floor, and drove to the hospital with my hazard lights flashing. The pressure had finally broken him. The loss of his scholarship, our homelessness, the family destruction. I held his hand in the emergency room, promising we'd survive this together while wondering if I was lying. Jack's trial began with his lawyer painting him as the victim of a dysfunctional family. He presented Jack as a troubled soul who needed help, not prison. The narrative placed blame on everyone but Jack, our parents for enabling, me for abandoning him, society for failing him. I watched from the gallery as they transformed the predator into prey. Maya's testimony was powerful, but brutal to witness. She spoke clearly about that night, about Jack's violence, about the trauma that followed. The defense attorney's cross-examination was merciless, bringing up her past relationships, her social media posts, implying she'd invited the attention. I watched the jury's faces, seeing doubt creep in where certainty should have remained. My own testimony focused on the pattern of abuse I'd witnessed. I detailed Jack's escalation, the violence against our mother, the fear that permeated our home. As I spoke, Jack stared at me from the defendant's table, mouthing words that looked like threats. His lawyer objected repeatedly, trying to limit what I could share about our family's history. Our mother took the stand for the defense, claiming I'd always hated Jack and had orchestrated this situation out of jealousy. She painted herself as a devoted mother, trying to help her troubled son while her daughter worked to destroy the family. Her performance was convincing, tears falling at precisely the right moments as she portrayed me as the real villain. The hung jury on the assault charge felt like a punch to the gut. They convicted Jack only on the substance charges, resulting in a 3-year sentence that would likely mean 18 months with good behavior. Maya collapsed at the verdict, Sarah holding her as she sobbed. The system had failed again, just as it had with Jack's previous victims. Maya's second sewer slide attempt happened on the courthouse steps. She'd waited until the crowds dispersed, then swallowed an entire bottle of pills. I performed CPR until the ambulance arrived, her lips turning blue under my hands. At the hospital, I sat with her while she recovered, both of us knowing the verdict had stolen something that might never return. Rico's men caught Oscar outside the courthouse 2 days later. They worked him over professionally, breaking ribs and leaving his face unrecognizable. The message was was clear. Payment was overdue. I sold everything I owned, my laptop, textbooks, even the necklace our grandmother had given me. Still $5,000 short, I was given one final week to find the money. The news of Jack being attacked in prison came through our lawyer. An inmate whose sister had been assaulted took justice into his own hands, leaving Jack paralyzed from the waist down. He survived but would never walk again. My parents immediately blamed me, filing a lawsuit for emotional distress, claiming my testimony had marked him as a target. The bankruptcy filing felt like admitting defeat. At 23, I sat in a lawyer's office declaring financial ruin. Hospital bills, credit card debt from identity theft, legal fees. The numbers overwhelmed any possibility of recovery. My dreams of finishing college evaporated as I faced decades of financial destruction. Oscar dropped out to work, taking minimum wage jobs to support us both. We moved into a rat-infested studio apartment, sharing a single bed and taking turns sleeping on the floor. He worked nights at a warehouse while I worked days at a diner, passing each other like ships as we struggled to survive. The bright futures we'd imagined had dimmed to mere survival. The civil judgment came down like a hammer. $2 million in damages I'd never be able to pay. Sarah's family had won their suit, but the victory was hollow. My parents had shielded their assets before the arrest, leaving me as the only defendant with future earning potential. Every paycheck for the rest of my life would be garnished, trapping me in permanent poverty. I found myself turning tricks in motel rooms near the airport, using the cash to chip away at Rico's debt. The work destroyed something inside me each night, but Oscar needed protection. I'd created elaborate stories for clients who wanted to hear about trauma, twisting Maya's pain into their fantasies. The money went straight to Rico's crew, buying us another week of safety. 3 months later, my mother walked out of minimum security after serving barely any time. She immediately launched herself as a motivational speaker, spinning our family's destruction into inspirational content about surviving ungrateful children. Her social media following grew as she monetized every detail of our tragedy, selling courses on maintaining faith through family betrayal. My father's heart gave out during a court hearing about asset forfeiture. The stress of losing everything finally caught up with his body. At the funeral, my mother played the grieving widow perfectly while live streaming for her followers. She announced that everything would go to Jack through a will my father had supposedly written in prison. Oscar and I weren't mentioned. Jack's early release came after 18 months. Prison overcrowding and good behavior got him out despite the substance conviction. He rolled out in a wheelchair, playing up his paralysis for sympathy while immediately violating parole by contacting underage girls online. The parole officer barely glanced at his check-ins, too overwhelmed with cases to notice. I discovered Jack's new activities when a mother contacted me through my old social media account. Her 12-year-old daughter had been talking to someone online who claimed to be a paralyzed victim of family violence. The profile pictures were Jack's, the manipulation tactics identical to his previous patterns. She wanted to know if this was really my brother. My attempts to report Jack's violations went nowhere. The detective who took my report rolled her eyes, clearly viewing me as the vindictive sister Jack's lawyer had portrayed. Without hard evidence of actual contact with minors, just suspicious behavior, they wouldn't act. The system that had failed Maya continued failing new victims. Oscar started dealing to make ends meet. Small amounts at first, just enough to cover rent when my income fell short. He used connections from his warehouse job, moving pills to co-workers pulling double shifts. I watched him transform into someone I didn't recognize, the gentle boy I'd protected becoming hardened by survival needs. The humiliation of my SX work going public came through a client who recognized me from college. Screenshots of my escort ads spread through group chats of former classmates. The mockery was vicious. The girl who'd abandoned her family for education now selling herself. My mother used it as content, crying about her daughter's fall from grace. Rico's murder by a rival dealer should have freed us from the debt. Instead, his crew sold our obligation to someone worse. The new collectors didn't accept weekly payments. They wanted everything immediately, or they'd take it in blood. Oscar and I had 72 hours to find $12,000. Oscar's substance dealing escalated to meet the deadline. He took bigger risks, moved larger quantities, stayed out later each night. I pretended not to notice the scales in our bathroom, the constant phone buzzing, the new people who knew his name. We were both destroying ourselves in different ways. The security camera footage of Oscar making a deal in a parking garage ended up in police hands. Someone had snitched, probably a rival dealer. The arrest happened at our apartment at dawn. I watched them lead him away in handcuffs while calculating bail money I didn't have. The public defender later explained he should take a plea deal, 5 to 7 years if he was lucky. Maya's death came on the 2nd anniversary of the assault. Sarah called me from the funeral home, her voice empty as she explained her parents had banned me from attending. Maya had never recovered from the system's failure to deliver justice. Her note mentioned feeling like she'd died that night in our apartment anyway. The rest was just waiting for her body to catch up. I walked into traffic 3 days later, not actively suicidal, just too exhausted to check for cars. The impact wasn't enough to cull me, just enough to land me in psychiatric hold. 72 hours of mandatory evaluation while Oscar sat in jail and Jack groomed new victims online. The hospital bills would just add to my insurmountable debt. 3 months passed in the psychiatric facility. Insurance covered the minimum stay, but I'd learned to play the game, show improvement, take the medications, participate in group therapy. They released me to find Oscar had been sentenced to 5 years. Jack had testified against him in exchange for leniency on his own parole violations. My mother's influence had grown during my hospitalization. She'd written a book about raising troubled children, using our names and stories without permission. The advance was substantial, all of it going to Jack's care. She'd become a regular on morning talk shows, crying about her paralyzed son and criminal daughter. I discovered Jack's latest crimes through a technical mistake. He'd accidentally shared his cloud storage with an old email I still had access to. Hundreds of files, including videos of Maya's assault and what looked like material involving children. My hands shook as I documented everything, knowing the system had already failed so many times. The detective I reported to was different this time. She took the evidence seriously, launched a real investigation. Within a week, Jack was arrested again. The laptop they seized contained enough evidence for serious federal charges. My mother immediately launched a campaign claiming I'd planted everything after his death. Jack's sewer slide came the night before his federal arraignment. He'd stockpiled my mother's pain medication, taking enough to ensure he wouldn't survive. His note blamed me for everything: our family's destruction, his paralysis, his inability to change. He mentioned other victims whose names I didn't recognize, girls who'd never come forward. My mother had me arrested that same night, claiming I'd murdered Jack. The investigation cleared cleared me quickly. He'd been under constant surveillance. The medication in his system matched my mother's prescription, but she kept the narrative alive online, her followers sending death threats while she monetized her grief. The contents of Jack's laptop made national news briefly, before being overshadowed by bigger scandals. Investigators found evidence of at least 12 victims over the years, including Maya. Most families didn't want to pursue cases against a dead man. The system closed the files, called it resolved. Oscar got stabbed in prison 2 months later. Jack had maintained connections inside even while paralyzed, arranging the attack as final revenge. Oscar survived, but with permanent kidney damage requiring dialysis. I couldn't afford the medical transport for visits, could only talk to him through collect calls that ate up my meager earnings. I started a podcast about justice system failures, documenting our story and others like it. The following grew slowly. Other survivors, other families destroyed by enabling and systemic failures. It wasn't healing exactly, but it felt like something. Until Jack's estate sued for defamation and won a gag order. I violated the order within a week, warning parents about online predators using Jack's methods. The contempt charge meant 30 days in county jail. My cellmate had called her rapist after years of police inaction. We didn't talk much, but we understood each other. Some justice comes from the system, some you take yourself. The award for the podcast came while I was inside. Best independent journalism on criminal justice reform. Ironic, considering I couldn't even accept it in person. The recognition meant nothing against $3 million in combined debts. Every penny I'd ever earn was already spoken for. Oscar's early release due to overcrowding came with conditions. He needed a stable address, regular employment, substance testing. I'd prepared our studio apartment, found him a dishwasher job, set up his medical appointments. He walked out different, thinner, older, moving carefully around the kidney damage. Prison substances helped him manage the pain. We settled into a routine. I worked days at a call center, lying about my criminal record. Oscar washed dishes at night, coming home reeking of industrial soap. We passed each other like ghosts, too exhausted for real conversation. His pills disappeared faster than his prescription allowed, but I pretended not to notice. The OD happened on a Tuesday. I found him on our bathroom floor, lips blue, needle still in his arm. The paramedics worked for 20 minutes before calling it. 25 years old, destroyed by trying to protect a family that consumed us all. I sat with his body until they made me leave. The funeral was small, just me and a few people from his job. My mother didn't come, though she posted about her tragic loss online. I buried him with the photo from his 16th birthday, back when I'd convinced him he wasn't a loser, back when I thought loving someone enough could save them. 5 years have passed since that Tuesday. I work at a crisis center now, talking to assault survivors who can't trust the system. My debts will never be cleared. Bankruptcy doesn't touch student loans or civil judgments. Every paycheck gets garnished, leaving just enough to survive. I visit Oscar's grave on Sundays, updating him on the survivors I've helped, telling him about small victories in a system designed to fail. My mother still posts about her angel son Jack, the troubled boy failed by his vindictive sister. She's never mentioned Oscar's name. The truth is that justice and healing rarely align. Sometimes protecting others means sacrificing yourself in ways that can't be undone. I tried to save everyone and ended up saving no one, but I keep answering the crisis line. Keep fighting for survivors, because that's all that's left. Oscar died at 25, Maya at 21, and Jack took dozens of victims with him. I'm still here, carrying their weight, trying to make it mean something. The center pays minimum wage, but it's honest work. My supervisor knows my history, hired me because of it. We lose more cases than we win, but sometimes a survivor gets believed, gets help, gets out. It's not redemption. Nothing could be, but it's what I can do with what remains. Tomorrow I'll answer more calls, guide more survivors through systems that don't want to help them. I'll remember Oscar's face before the substances, Maya's smile before that night, even Jack as the brother I once wanted to love. They're all gone now, consumed by failures bigger than any of us. I live with the knowledge that love isn't enough, that sacrifice doesn't guarantee salvation, that some cycles can't be broken, only survived. My mother's influence grows, Jack's victims stay silent, and Oscar's grave needs fresh flowers. This is what's left after the wreckage. One person answering a phone, trying to help the next survivor navigate the ruins. Thanks for letting me be your commentary companion through all of this. Always a pleasure adding my 2 cents to your experience.